The White House had the media Christmas party over the weekend. Now, when you're in the press, you have an adversarial relationship with the president, particularly if the president is Republican. Joe Biden doesn't like their age criticism of him, though. But even though you're technically adversarial in some ways, although not really to Democrats, when the president of the United States of America invites you and a plus one to the White House to tour for Christmas and see the Christmas decorations and have your picture taken with the president, you tend to go. I thought this is very notable from Ben Smith at Semaphore. The White House holiday party for the press corps is one of those occasions where journalists balance their adversarial independence and their institutional role and invariably decide to come to the party in the cheerily decorated East Wing. Even the New York Times, which eschews the White House Correspondents Association affairs, sent a delegation. Attendees got the opportunity to bring a friend or family member to the White House for a photo with the president, a hard thing to turn down. Given the goodwill of the captive, well-fed audience, Wednesday's party was also a prime opportunity for President Joe Biden to dispel his main problem with the U.S. media right now, the undercurrent of concern he's too old for the job. It was an opportunity in some sense to say, hey, you idiots, I may be old, but I'm fine. This was clearly the goal of brief remarks he made at the East Wing party, which began with the usual joke, I'm for a free press even when you drive me crazy, but then he strayed into a couple of hazy monologues, which ended only when his wife interrupted him to remind him it was a party. His speech wasn't terrible or even noteworthy, but everybody in the room realized Biden had a simple rhetorical job and hadn't pulled it off. That's right. Joe Biden reinforced in everybody's mind he's too old for the job when he shouldn't do that. In fact, that is a larger consensus and a growing body of evidence in the polling shows that more and more Americans are realizing that given the choice between dementia-addled Joe Biden and Donald Trump, they might prefer Donald Trump. There's new polling out of Michigan and Georgia that has Donald Trump well ahead of Joe Biden, and there's the Iowa polling in the primary that shows Trump now above 50% in the primary. And so the conspiracy theories are starting to set in, and the reality is starting to set in. The theories, the conspiracies, the prognostications, the predictions, they're all starting to collide. And to some degree, you can kind of see it coming. So I'm on WORD in Greenville, South Carolina. Tara Servatius is before me. She's the morning show host of the Tara Show. She's got a thread several people have sent me this morning. She writes on Twitter, the Democrats are running a psyop on GOP voters and we're walking right into their trap. Bookmark this handy guide. Now, consolidate GOP voter support behind Trump by convincing Republicans with manipulated polls that Trump can easily beat Biden. Ignore and don't promote the internals of these polls that show if Trump is convicted, Biden, as unpopular as he is, beats Trump by 6 to 10 points, cheating or no cheating. From December to January, the mainstream media runs a relentless media campaign to ensure Nikki Haley, a uniparty member who is essentially a Democrat, is maneuvered into second position in the GOP primary as an insurance policy. March, start the first major Trump trial after Super Tuesday, by which time enough GOP primary nominating contests will have cemented Trump as the nominee. May to June, lower the boom, convict Trump for the first time ahead of the GOP nominating convention. The internals of Democrat polls have been telling us for months that GOP will fracture if Trump's convicted, with 50% wanting Trump to stay on the ballot and 50% wanting to dump him. August, for the final coup de grace, Democrats replace Biden as their nominee with a much more popular Democrat who is unveiled to great MSM acclaim at their August conventions. November, massive, maybe even historic Democratic landslide gives the Dems the numbers they need in the House and the Senate. This is one view. And by the way, I think Tara is right on a lot of points. I don't know that it's a conspiracy. I think it's just inevitable. If you follow the cards, and the Democrats have been laying this out, they want to convict Trump. They want to do it in one of many trials this year. They want to do it before the election, but after the primaries. The trials are aligned to mostly happen after the primaries. It's a real world scenario. Now, I've been thinking about the polling here because I somehow or another fell into a group. And I gotta deliver a paper to them this week. So this group is, you meet once a month, you deliver an academic paper and buy everybody dinner. I made the mistake of showing up one time with a buddy of mine, and suddenly I'm in the group. But it's a great group. It's some college presidents and lawyers and doctors and prominent businessmen in the area. A couple of judges on the federal and state judges. A lot of them are longtime friends of mine. And I'm going to talk about polling. I've been interviewing pollsters, very prominent pollsters, because there is this sentiment among some Republicans that the polls are designed to shape our opinion as opposed to telling us what's actually going on. If you are not a Trump Republican right now, your sentiment is that the polls are designed to shape people's opinion for Trump. If you are a Trump supporter right now, the polls are just showing what's going on the ground. And that's kind of the tell that the polls aren't really shaping opinion. Now, a lot of you will think the polls are shaping opinion, but I've talked to Republican pollsters, I've talked to Democratic pollsters, I've talked to campaign pollsters related to the Trump people, the DeSantis people, the Haley people, the Biden people. I've talked to outside pollsters and media pollsters. None of the pollsters, Democrat, Republican, Independent, believe that the polls at the media level, the public opinion polling, are designed to shape you. In fact, one of the Republican pollsters pointed out that you will note you're not seeing the internal polling from Haley and DeSantis and Christie right now, or even Ramaswamy. You're not, because all of their polls also show Donald Trump in the lead. The fact of the matter is the polling shows a majority of Republicans want Donald Trump. It's not shaping opinion, it's showing you opinion. And the proof of that is that there's no, if DeSantis had an opinion to dispute the public opinion polling out there, he would show it to you, and he's not. So it's not a conspiracy of pollsters trying to shape opinion so much as a lot of Republicans are enthusiastic about Donald Trump. At least that's what they're telling pollsters. There is, among some of the pollsters I've talked to, Democrat and Republican, a suggestion that Donald Trump support is actually not as prominent as the public polling shows, and that it's the corollary or the flip from 2016. In 2016, Donald Trump outperformed all the polls because a lot of people in the Republican Party supported him and were scared to say so because of the bullying. And there are some pollsters who believe right now that the Trump support is manifest larger in the polling than it actually is, because a lot of his opponents, DeSantis, Haley, and the like, and their supporters, are kind of scared of the blowback they get from the Trump people. Regardless, if you talk to Republican pollsters and Democratic pollsters who aren't releasing their polls are much more detailed than the public opinion polling. They're much more expensive. They're much more granular. They go much deeper. They're for the candidates to try to find a path. Increasingly, their polling shows a lot of the Republicans, majority of the Republicans, support Trump. And their polling also shows the more you hit Trump, the more it helps Trump. That's what their unreleased polling shows. So I have a hard time believing the public polling is trying to shape our perception when the internal polls for the campaigns are showing the same thing. Now, you could say, well, because those public polls shaped everyone's perception. But if that's the case, then trot out new polling and show and shift. But they're not. They're just trying to shape. None of the pollsters I know, none of the pollsters I've talked to believe that the polling actually shapes public perception. They're just trying to capture where the public is. It's also much harder now, and it's much less accurate, because in the past, everybody had a landline. You called the landline, most people answered. When caller ID started, less people answered, but still most people answered. Then you got cell phones. The rules are different for calling cell phones from landlines. Landlines, you can use a computer to auto-dial phone numbers. With a cell phone, you have to physically have someone dial the phone number. You can't do random computer-generated auto-dial. It's against the law, so it's harder to poll mobile phones, fewer and fewer people answer when they don't recognize the number, so the polling is less accurate. A national poll of Americans is more accurate than a state poll. State poll is more accurate than a county poll. County poll is more accurate than a city poll because the pool and the broad expanse of people at a national level is much broader. That helps the poll with more accuracy. And even most pollsters I talk to say polling is slowly dying. It's less and less accurate, though at the parameters of national polling, you can still kind of get a sense of what's going on. So now this gets me back to Tara's piece is I would disagree to a degree that the polls at the public level are being manipulated. No Republican or Democratic pollster I've talked to believes that's the case. Their internal polling shows the same. They believe they're polling. They think it's a reflection of what's going on here. And that, as several of them pointed out as well, that no Trump supporter believes the polls are being manipulated. They all believe it's the people who believe the polls are manipulated are the ones who don't support Trump. Once the race consolidates, Trump's the nominee or not, whoever it is, and it shows the Republican ahead, no Republican is going to say the poll's going to be manipulated. It depends on where your candidate is. But beyond that, I think Tara shows exactly where this is headed for most people. When you do look at the underlying fundamentals, a Trump indictment fundamentally disrupts the race, and he is very likely to be a Trump conviction. He's very likely to be convicted in Florida just because of the nature of that case, unless the judge finds a way to throw it out. He's got the most favorable judge in that case, but also the most unfavorable fact pattern for him. It balances itself out. If he is convicted, however, that will shift public opinion against him pretty dramatically. People don't want to vote for a convicted felon. You move beyond there, this is why I started with the Ben Smith piece. Joe Biden has an opportunity to convince the public and the press in the room with him that he's sharp and he flubs it. He didn't even have to do much of anything, and he still flubbed at telling the press, I'm okay, I'm competent and fit to be president. He flubs it in a private, off-the-record Christmas party. He flubs it. I don't see how the Democrats can replace Joe Biden right now in the primary process because the ballot access rules, the way they work, it's increasingly difficult to get a new person in to challenge him. But I have a harder and harder time seeing that by the time we get to August, Joe Biden is not going to be emotionally, mentally, physically suffering so much that the Democrats realize they can't put him up, and maybe they're stuck with Kamala. Maybe they open it up at the convention. But you go through the summer, you find Trump convicted in one of these cases, and he becomes the Republican nominee. I absolutely think the Democrats pull a bait and switch. I think the writing's on the wall, and that I think whether you believe the polling's manipulated and designed to build this or you believe it's just a reflection of the voters right now, either way, the outcome is still the same. Tara and I lined up in the same position at the end where I do believe that the Democrats do swap out Joe Biden for someone else in the end. I have a hard time. They can't do it in the primary. They got to do it at the convention. I think he's got to step aside. It probably leaves it to Kamala, which is a disaster still for the Democrats. But you get Donald Trump convicted, which they absolutely want to do, it becomes real hard to get independent voters to come his way. They may all stay home, but the Democratic field becomes so energized having Donald Trump as the nominee, they overwhelm. Right now, though, it looks very good for Donald Trump. I just don't think that's a manipulation. I just think that's the reality of where it is right now. But the rest of reality won't dawn until you have a conviction and you have a fired up Democratic base of people who want to stop a convicted felon from becoming president. That shakes everything up. And if Republicans don't realize it right now, they walk right into this. The Democrats set it up perfectly for the GOP to do. And remember, it's the Democrats who in 2022 poured a lot of money into trumpeting pro-Trump candidates they knew would lose in the general election. They're kind of experts at doing this. And we're kind of experts on our side of falling for it every single time.
He'll do the research and give it